Today's GovLove episode is brought to you by the Fels Institute of Government at the University of Pennsylvania. Looking to develop your leading abilities and increase your public impact? The Fels Institute of Government's Master of Public Administration programs at the University of Pennsylvania can get you there, with innovative coursework taught by recognized experts and practitioners. Learn about their courses, experiential learning opportunities, and extensive alumni network by going to www.fels.upenn.edu. That's www.fels.upenn.edu.
Hey all, coming to you from Asheville, North Carolina, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government brought to you by ELGL. I'm Rafael Baptista, Strategy Director for Buncombe County, North Carolina, GovLove co-host. Today we got a great episode talking about veterans and local government. First, the best way to support GovLove is to become an ELGL member. We're a professional association that engages the brightest minds in local government. Today's guest is Ben Effinger. He's a senior leader with LA County Treasurer and Tax Collection, a U.S. Air Force veteran, doctoral student, and advocate for veterans and local government and men's mental health. Thanks for joining GovLove today, Ben.
Happy to be here, brother.
And I was going to say, reading that intro, I'm tired just reading about all that you had going on in your life. It's really impressive.
It's one thing after another. I stay busy, and I don't focus on the macro level. I stay in the micro level from task to task. Otherwise, I'll get myself overwhelmed.
Well, that sounds like pretty good advice there. Well, here in GovLove, we like to start with a lightning round to get to know you better. So my first question for you is, what book, in your limited free time, what book are you reading right now that's not for your doctoral program?
Qualifying it. Textbooks and articles don't qualify for scholarly reading, but I would say the book that I've most recently read, again, was Silos, Politics, and Turf Wars from Patrick Lencioni. I love the leadership fables. They're quick little reads, 200 pages tops, but they're written in a story format, short chapters that you can blow through, but then there's always principles to take away at the end, and that's probably my favorite. Same author that wrote 5 Dysfunctions of a Team and all of the other leadership fables. But yeah, if you haven't read it, check it out. Silos, Politics, and Turf Wars.
He's one of my favorite leadership authors. He did a great presentation 3-4 years ago at ICMA. It was really fun. And do you know what the first music album that you bought was?
Do I know what the first music album I bought was? So I'm not old, but I'm old enough that I think my first album was a cassette. And it was probably one of the early Garth Brooks albums. So it was either Rope in the Wind or No Fences. I don't remember which one exactly, but it was one of his early albums, and it was on cassette tape. I remember that. I wore out the, stop and rewind buttons because you could never, just go back to the song. You always had to listen to the song, then rewind it, then play it again.
I love it. And where do you go for inspiration these days?
So I've been, I'm a huge proponent of, listening to audiobooks, podcasts, whatever catches my attention for the moment. But one of my routine things that I find myself going back to is a YouTube video from a commencement speech from David Foster Wallace. It's called This Is Water. And it's a perceptive piece. I think he gave the commencement speech to Kenyon University in 2005, I believe it was. But the whole premise of the speech was just that you're viewing the world through your own perception, and your own perception isn't taking into account the facts or realities or capital T truth of the world around you. You're seeing everything through your own lens of it. And it helps me reground and kind of get back to where my feet are and realize that, other people around me are experiencing life in the way that they experience life, and what I'm seeing through my eyes is only one aspect of it, right? And the greater world is going on around us, and it's happening on a day-to-day basis.
Sounds good. Sounds like some pretty good advice. So let's get into the meat of today. The first thing I want to talk to you is about your work advocating for veterans and local government. But I thought maybe a place to start was I listened to your interview with Joe Turner a couple weeks ago, And somewhere around there, one of you all mentioned the small percentage of Americans who serve in the military. And I'm one of the large percentage who has not served in the military. And one of the things I was just thinking about listening to that was, I don't think a lot of us really understand what going in the military is like, right? We have these images of boot camp and fighting in combat, but I'm assuming there's a whole lot more to the military. So maybe one thing you could do, just, I don't know if it's break a stigma, I'm not really sure, but help our listeners understand, like, what does life in the military look like for individuals? Like, what's going on there that's going on day to day, but also setting them up for life after military?
No, absolutely. And I like to use a lot of the similarities between, city, local government, and the military, because essentially a military base is its own self-contained community that does all of the same functions that, local government does. So the first thing that happens when you sign up for the military is, they have to deprogram you from your civilian way of thinking, very individualistic, what about me? I got to get mine, that mindset, and rebuild you as part of a team. Right. And that's the whole purpose of your basic training and your specialty school that you go to is, learning how to be a part of the whole. Right. Because you are a critical component, but the guy to the left and the right depends on you to do whatever your job is. And it's, mission success is critical depending on whether you're on humanitarian mission, combat mission, peacetime mission, whatever the case may be, you still have a job to do. It's not like, oh, we're not in war at the moment, so now we can just, turn off our military. So in doing those training, aspects, one of the lies I told myself was, well, I'm not ready for college, or I'll do college down the road. Well, when you go into the military, you start learning right away. It's like pseudo college, right? Like they're teaching right off the bat. You're learning about military history, and you're learning about all the things that happened before you and how you fit into this bigger picture. And then when you go to your specialty school, you're getting hands-on job training, right? They're spinning you up in whatever your discipline is, whether it's civil engineering, policing, whatever the case may be. They're spinning you up in a specific discipline. So, I think a lot of the myth is, we tell ourselves, well, we're not going to go to college. We're going to join the military. Well, going to the military is going to college because you're still learning. It's just masked in a different way. So by the time you're done with that learning aspect and you're ready to ship off to your base and become a functional part of that base, you're essentially just plugging into an ecosystem that's very much like a city, right? You show up at work and you're wearing a uniform, but your job's not going to be much different than your civilian counterparts on the outside of the wire, right? Like you're doing very similar jobs, whether you're working in the services facilities where you're working at the gym or serving chow or doing different things, or you're doing road maintenance with the civil engineering squadron or different things. Now, there are military specific type jobs, right? Like not a lot of us are, luggage handlers or, air traffic controllers that are working out on the flight line. But those are still jobs that do exist in the civilian world. They just may not exist in every civilian agency, right? But yeah, that's very much, the aspects, and as you get higher in rank, rank has its privilege, right? Like as you're in the lower levels, you're putting on a uniform, you're going to work, you're coming back home, you're living in a barracks style living environment. So it's very communal, it's very much, not really a differentiation or a line between work and off time, right? Because you're kind of just in that military environment. But then as you gain rank and responsibilities, you're able to move off base, engage in going to school or, get married, do things, not saying that rank, you have to be a certain rank, get married, but just using that as an example, moving off base and doing these things. It's almost like you have two lives going at the same time because you've got once you leave base life and then once you put on your uniform and go back to base life. Right. But all of those disciplines that they instill in you all the way from the beginning of basic training through your job training, through the day-to-day, inspections and being ready for work, I think those translate out to knowledge, skills, and abilities that veterans, when they're done with their service commitment, can bring out into the civilian workforce and really make us, the Swiss Army knives that fit into civilian organizations that really can fill a need or a gap or a niche, a specialty niche, if it's a hard to recruit for item that really you may have a hard time finding from just, an open job bulletin from your local, job market. One of the things that I like to talk about with veterans is, knowing the value that they bring to the table. They didn't just serve in the military for 4 years or 8 years or, I did my time and I retired. You have a lot of knowledge, skills, and ability that you bring to the table, but that civilian hiring manager on the other side of the table doesn't know. And you have to be able to clearly articulate that in plain language so that way they understand, not speaking in this cryptic military language that, only somebody that's been in would happen to be able to decode it and understand your worth or your value.
I definitely feel that. I've reviewed some resumes. I'm like, I literally have no idea what this person did in the Army. Well, thanks for that. That was really helpful. One of the things that's really important is helping most soldiers to not retire from the Army, right? They're not serving 20 years. And, my brother joined the Army later in life. He served 3-4 years, left as a sergeant. I remember one of the things he always told me was how disappointed he was that a lot of the soldiers he worked with didn't take advantage of the benefits for post-military careers while in the military. But it sounds like you did do a pretty good job of taking advantage of that. So can you talk a little bit about that, what you did while in active duty to prepare yourself after active duty?
Absolutely. And one of the biggest things that I preached with my soldiers, and I learned from an NCO early on in my military career, was there were two pillars that were going to help you: financial responsibility and also taking advantage of your education benefits. Now, to go back to that previous conversation we had, a lot of us said, oh, college is not for us. We're going to go into the military. Well, as soon as you realize that you've been learning all along, you're like, well, I might as well just make the most out of this. And, when I was in, and again, this is going to be a little dated information because I served from 2002 to 2010. So it's been, 13 years-ish ago. But you received tuition assistance while you were on active duty. At the time, I think it was $4,500 a year. Well, if you were going to, say the run-of-the-mill university, a class was, $250, $300 a credit. So $750 a class, right? You could take 6 classes in the course of the year on the DoD's dime and just fit that into your duty schedule. A lot of people, will look at, well, I don't have time to go to school. Well, I was one of those people that, I started at Minot State University when I was stationed in North Dakota. I went to school on campus for 2 classes and quickly realized that I can't balance an in-person schedule and my military commitment at the same time. There's just not enough flexibility in both. So I withdrew from Minot State and enrolled in an online university, which was much more flexible, right? I didn't have to be in a classroom at a certain time. I could do the assignments at my pace on my schedule, which is super helpful, but required a different amount of discipline because you weren't physically in class every week. So you had to make sure you time budgeted accordingly and knew when your assignments were due and didn't get behind, because if you got behind, you ended up buried. So those were things that were important. But, my supervisor, when I first started classes, he emphasized the importance of taking advantage of the benefits that are afforded to you while you're in, and not just getting out after 4 years, 6 years, whatever the case may be, and not having anything to show for it other than, you made a paycheck and you had health insurance and all these kind of things, right? The concept of leaving it better than you found it. So I, took pride in that and watched him, walk the walk and talk the talk, right? Because he finished his 6-year commitment. He graduated with a bachelor's degree. And, even though he was a really good NCO, he decided that career military wasn't for him. He separated, went back to, I think he was from either Arizona or New Mexico. I don't remember exactly where he was from, but, had his path paved for him because he had his 4-year degree. He had 6 years of experience, and he was translating that into a civilian career, going back into the loss prevention, logistics type career field. And I was really inspired by that because I saw that, while he was on active duty, he was planning that next chapter, which really inspired me to use that same mentality with my airmen of, you're here for right now. I want you to do the best job that you can while you're here, but you should be planning for when it's time to re-enlist to give yourself a choice, whether you want to reenlist and continue your military career, or you have options at the end of your enlistment and can go pursue civilian. You don't want the only option to be, I have to reenlist because there's no other choice.
So that's really great advice, and the idea of always being prepared for the next step. So let's pretend you were an airman, right? You know that you're going to transition out of the Air Force, and you were military police, correct? When
Yes.
you were in the Air Force. So, you gotta, the date at which you're no longer going to be an active duty airman. What support does the military provide to you in those last months? So when you transition out, you're transitioning into something, not transitioning just out of something.
No, that's a great question. So there's a lot better structure and robust structure in place now than there was when I separated in 2010. And part of that is the fact that social media has made things better. LinkedIn is a much more robust platform, and you can connect with individuals and learn from other people's, accomplishments and also mistakes, right? So you're seeing everything for its transparent value. But this is where ICMA really excites me about their Skills Bridge program that they have. So they have a Skills Bridge MOU with the Department of Defense, which allows them to provide their veterans in local government fellowship. And what that does is essentially Skills Bridge for any military member, no matter what branch of the military you're in, allows you to apply within your, I think you have to apply about a year out from getting out, but within your last 6 months, if approved, you are still being paid your military wage, you're still getting all your military benefits, but you're allowed to basically go to a local government agency and do a 6-month fellowship, right? On the job training for a local government. Could be a city, could be a county, joint powers authority, municipal, whatever, right? Anything that falls under that umbrella. And the only requirement is the agency that you're working for signs on a host agreement with ICMA. Basically, that agreement holds the agency accountable for providing the veteran value, right? So you're not just getting free labor for 6 months to file papers or do ministerial tasks, right? Like you're actually going to provide them value-added civilian experience. And that really excited me, that program did, which is when the Veterans Advisory Committee in 2020 formed with ICMA. I jumped on board and became an advocate in that arena because there is so much talent leaving the military every single year. And a lot of the agencies that are around these bases where folks are transitioning out of don't even know about the diamonds that are in their own backyard. They don't know how to, recruit those individuals or create partnerships or do all these different things to tap into that, that pipeline of individuals that are already skilled up in various environments that can work, just basically day one in civilian local government. And not having to worry about, their dependability, their dedication to the mission, the different things that veterans already bring to the table, because those are check boxes. And now you just need to skill them in what are the specific, jurisdictional, boundaries or requirements to operate in, this city or this county or whatever the case may be. ICMA does a great job of marketing that program, but I still think there's a lot that can be done to gain more host agencies across the United States, to gain more buy-in, to demystify the veteran hiring process. I do have success stories of veterans that have entered that fellowship and gone on to city management positions, county administrator positions, different, roles. But there's also still, and you alluded to it earlier, the stigmatization of veterans. And that's a whole nother topic that we can peel back the layer of the onion on. But when you're sitting across from a hiring manager, there could be conscious bias, there could be unconscious bias, there could be a million different things that are going through the head of that hiring manager that maybe their only viewpoint of a veteran has been informed by TV, movies, and drama, right? Yeah. Whereas another hiring manager may have had a bad experience with hiring a veteran and now they're turned off to that entire population because of that one individual, right? So there's a mix of things that could go on that could inform that decision-making process, but, working and advocating to change that and kind of smash that stigma and really open up the floodgates for the opportunities for veterans is really where I'm all at.
So let's sit on this management fellowship for a moment, but then I want to go back to not just getting veterans into management positions, but filling, paramedic, police officer, the positions that I know we all in local government struggle to fill. But with the fellowship first, you got me sold. I'm interested, right? Can you talk a little bit about what the process looks like for a local government that's interested, cost implications, and kind of how does the host know, am I a good fit, right? Because I want to provide value. How am I going to know if I can add value as a host?
Yeah, so absolutely. The first thing is, really, analyzing that host agency agreement and getting that executed with ICMA, because once that's on file, that kind of opens the door to the rest of the program. I can tell you it's not an easy process because, LA County, I work for the largest municipal government in the United States. It took us several years to get our host agreement done, and it doesn't look anything like ICMA's boilerplate host agreement because we had to get the head of HR and county council involved and all of the players at the table. But I'm happy to report in January 2023, we did sign the host agency agreement with ICMA, which opened up our program for LA County.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It took, from, I think, 2019 to 2023. I mean, and the pandemic sprinkled in there. So, other things took importance, but, it took us a while, but that host agreement is the absolute first step. And then after that host agreement, then what you want to do is really, and Lynn Phillips, my contact at ICMA, is a fantastic resource. But what she can provide are sample work plans, right? And really what you would want to do as your agency is define what would you really want that veteran to be exposed to, right? Whether it's going to be management level positions, or in LA County's case, we wrote management out of it. We made it just a veterans local government fellowship, right? So we can use it from entry-level positions all the way up the food chain. ICMA's program was really geared towards, targeting senior NCOs and officer level individuals that were transitioning out and really getting them into like city administrator positions. But LA County saw value in widening that program to, every position that a local government could need. So then once you've got those work plans devised, and maybe it's multiple work plans, right? Because it could be work plans for anybody that's working in different disciplines or somebody that's working specifically in the city manager's office, right? You could have multiple variations of those. Not saying you're going to get fellows to fill all of those job descriptions at the same time, but it can't hurt to have a catalog of things. So if somebody calls and says, hey, I'm separating from the military. I'm stationed in Germany currently, but I'm going back to Knoxville, Tennessee. And, I've contacted all of the areas around Knoxville, Tennessee to see who's got what available. If you've already got a catalog on file, you can say, yeah, great. We'd love to host you and bring you on for 6 months. You did touch on cost. There isn't a hard cost that is associated. But what has to be accounted for is the flexibility of the veteran, right? So obviously if they have a family or anything like that, I've seen most successful fellowships occur when the veteran is transitioning back to like a targeted locale, right? Like they've already know that they're going to move their family back to that area. They're going to settle in, and they are looking at just that specific geographic area. I have seen other fellowships or other participants that maybe want the experience, but know that they're not going to settle in that geographic area. So maybe their ideal is somewhere in Florida, but they have the opportunity to do their fellowship at a city in Texas. They'll take that city in Texas for the experience because there's nothing that they can find in Florida at the time. And then after that fellowship, go and rejoin their family or whatever is bringing them back to Florida, and use that as marketable real world experience to then sell themselves into a position once they get settled into, their destination of choice. So it all depends on, the flexibility of the veteran participant as well. But, the third layer of that process is really the screening, right? So ICMA runs multiple cohorts of the fellowship each year. Folks can apply to be part of those cohorts, and we also place people off cohorts. So just because it's not one of the 3 cohorts that are running, it doesn't mean that we can't treat people as one-offs and get them seated as well. But there's an interview process with ICMA, and then we do panel interviews with multiple representatives that are on the Veterans Advisory Committee. Those are assistant city managers, department directors from all across the United States that have a stake in the veteran population. So that way we can kind of get a feel for what the veteran brings to the table. And then after that, if Lynn then reaches out to agencies that she's got in the Rolodex of host agencies to say, hey, I've got a veteran, are you interested in interviewing them to participate in a fellowship in your local jurisdiction? So it's not like you just get a phone call, say, hey, I'm shipping a veteran to you. It's a mutual process to make sure that the agency can gainfully employ the veteran. Everything's going to work out logistically. And remember that the veteran is still on their federal government payroll. So you're not funding a position. You're essentially getting, a work study fellow for 6 months to be able to learn and contribute to your organization, but then at the same time, you're skilling them in local government.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a really great program. So one question I have is, I was meeting with one of our public safety directors the other day, and they said, what the biggest challenge I have is? I'm like, you can't hire? And they're like, yeah. Do you know why? I'm like, no. You want to tell me why? And they said, because the latest generation doesn't care about public service, and public safety is hard. I'm going to make a guess that people who served in the military, are dependable. They're hardworking. They're willing to put in the hours they need to do the job. They're probably the perfect candidates for public safety jobs. But you were military police, you're now a tax collector, right? And I've heard a lot that the transition from public safety roles in the military to civilian ones is kind of challenging. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe what we in local government can do to ease those barriers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's 2 sides to that equation that you touched on. Yes, the profile of the veteran, is very service oriented, service before self type mentality, and lines up good with, those first responder type roles. However, my personal experience, right, I had 8 years as a military police officer. I had various different certifications. I had gone to FBI hostage negotiation school. I had a bunch of tools in my toolbox. However, every agency I interviewed with, I didn't have specific certifications for their local jurisdiction. I didn't know intricately all of their different laws, rules, regulations. So it boiled down to you have to start all over at the bottom, go back to a police academy, do the whole deal all over again. And ultimately that was what helped inform my decision to pivot away from law enforcement, because essentially at 26, after being in the military for 8 years, I didn't want to start all over from the bottom of the totem pole. I think the Department of Defense is getting better at recognizing that and trying to standardize certifications across, various career fields in the military. So that way, when folks get out, it's got an equivalency. I can't say, just like all 50 states don't have reciprocity for everything, I can't say that the federal government mold has changed where, one shoe fits all for, training. But that's one thing that I will give kudos to the government for, is they're trying to create that standardization. On the flip side, I would encourage local government administrators and talking with your governing bodies and petitioning your state representatives to see how you can bridge those gaps between transitioning service member skill sets and maybe what certifications they have, to bringing them on board and recruiting them, and maybe even recruiting them at a commensurate level, but knowing there's going to be, an 18-month or a 2-year training curve to bring them online with, whatever jurisdictional requirements that you have. I know, operating in California, everything is the post police officer standardization and training is, all of the different certifications that you can have all the way from starting out to when you get to executive level management in the police departments. But figuring out, what the equivalencies are. And if somebody's getting out of the military with 8 years as a military police officer, yes, maybe they don't have your specific post certifications, but you could lateral them over as, starting as an 8-year veteran and then have a program for them to upskill while they're employed with your agency to be able to get whatever the commensurate post certifications are, or translate that, no different than transfer credit with, any university that you attend or want to go to, right? Figuring out what can fit and what can give credit would be awesome for veterans to be able to leverage. And it may actually increase your ability to recruit and target recruiting for veterans to want to choose to relocate to your area after they finish their military duty, because, they see that bridge as easier to cross than starting over from scratch.
Listening to you talk, Ben, one of the things that keeps coming in my mind, because whenever I'm doing these interviews, I'm thinking, how can I bring this back to Buncombe County, right? One of my thoughts is, well, I got a lot of hard-to-fill jobs here. How do I, if I were to sit down with my HR director and say, hey, I think we should do a targeted push for veterans. I think there's a lot of potential there. The answer might be, great, but, what kind of veteran makes sense for a 911 operator, child abuse social worker? There's a lot of things that I think a lot of us without military experience don't know. Is there someone we call the military and say, help us understand, here are our jobs? How do I learn more? What kind of person do I connect with to better understand what I can do and what I can expect from veterans? Who should I be targeting, right? I'm assuming a highly trained, soldier in specialized combat, maybe not the best person to be a child abuse investigator, maybe I'm wrong, but how do I figure out what roles in the military adapt better for different roles in local government?
No, that's absolutely a great question. And, you're in North Carolina, right?
Yep.
You've got a hotbed of bases and agencies that operate around your jurisdictional area. So, kind of jealous, we don't have that kind of a locale out here in Southern California. We're more spread out. So I can't recruit as well as you can, but, that's great. And there's two sides to it, right? There's the transitioning veteran that can use translation services that exist online now, where basically you can plug in your MOS or your AFSC and it will give you down a laundry list of what civilian equivalent positions are. And
what does MOS and the other acronym mean?
So military occupational specialty is MOS, which is basically your job type, whatever your job code is, and AFSC is Air Force Specialty Code. So they're essentially what your jobs are, right? It's your job classification, if you will. So in knowing those, you can put those into a database and it'll spit out, if I was a hazmat whatever in the military, it'll translate out and it'll say, hey, maybe you could work in a fire department as a, whatever X, Y, or Z, that deals with hazmat response situations within the fire department. And you didn't even know that was an equatable skill, or biochemical warfare and things like that all translate out to that same type of a hazmat job in a fire department, right? You wouldn't logically think that there's a connection there, but then you have to use these translation tools to be able to make the connections. The other things that I would encourage local government to do is to find yourself a subject matter expert in the veteran community that you can rely upon for skilling up your HR team. And the reason that I say that is because a lot of times, and you even alluded to it earlier, you saw a resume across your desk and you're like, I can't even read this because every third word is written in an acronym, right? Finding somebody that either knows that talk or knows, if they weren't in that same branch, knows somebody that can help with that, right? To kind of decipher, instead of just throwing it to the discard pile, let's actually look through this and see if there's any value add here. Those are important tools to have as a resource to say, hey, can you just look at this, or can you tell me if Fort Bragg is right down the street, and I'm just going to use that as an example, we know that they've got 10,000 transitioning soldiers that are coming out every year. What are the biggest jobs that are at Fort Bragg? Aside from combat related roles, what are the other types of roles that they have there? Because, everything in the military is not combat. Those individuals will be able to tell you what the top 10 or 15 military occupation specialties are that operate out of that base. And then based on those military occupational specialties, you can look at, those translator tools and say, okay, well, then there's a pool of potentially 10,000 people that are transitioning out of the military every year that are skilled in these areas. We need to make some sort of partnership with that base to be able to start holding job fairs on base, doing things to be able to infiltrate that population, to make them aware of what we offer, as employment on the civilian sector. Because I can tell you a lot of veterans, when they think government, the only thing they're thinking about is federal GS level positions, because that's the only thing they've ever been exposed to. They're not thinking state, county, or city level.
Right. So it sounds like we got to do some reach out.
Today's GovLove episode is brought to you by the Fels Institute of Government at the University of Pennsylvania. Looking to develop your leading abilities and increase your public impact? The Fels Institute of Government's Master of Public Administration programs at the University of Pennsylvania can get you there, with innovative coursework taught by recognized experts and practitioners. Learn about their courses, experiential learning opportunities, and extensive alumni network by going to www.fels.upenn.edu. That's www.fels.upenn.edu.
And what are some things that during the hiring process local governments can do to make it a little easier for veterans? Things that we should not ask, things we should ask, things that should be part of the hiring process. You mentioned like unconscious and conscious bias earlier. What are some things to be mindful?
So, what I really like in the hiring process are blind resume reviews, right? So it allows you to get away from any potential stigmatization that just automatically comes to mind. But another thing that was discussed recently with me was veterans preference points, right? And a lot of agencies offer veterans preference points, whether it's 5 points, whether it's 10 points, whatever your agency awards veterans, if they've, provide positive proof of their service and their discharge paperwork, then they can get bonus points added to their, civil service exams. However, if a veteran scores really well already, say they get a 95 or 97 or 98 on the composite score, right? But the agency awards 10 points, you're going to be banded higher than 100, right? You're going to be in that magical, what LA County calls the veteran band, the V band. You're going to have a composite score over 100. Well, we know in LA County, no other population besides veterans gets preference points or can get above 100 points, because we don't offer service credit bonus or anything like that in our hiring process. So when a hiring manager gets an eligibility list and sees that they have 3 people that scored above 100, automatically they're like, okay, I have 3 veterans I have to interview, right?
Yeah.
So your brain automatically kicks into that mode of, oh, well, I want to know all about, their military service. But let them explain it to you in their terms without the pointed questions. Where did you serve? Did you deploy to Iraq? Did you deploy to Afghanistan? All of the pointed questions where, if somebody says, well, I served in the military, but I never deployed to a combat zone, consciously you're like, okay, well, they still served in the military, but unconsciously you're like, okay, well, did you really serve in the military if you never went to war?
Yeah.
So those are kind of the questions that we uncover when we start to talk about this openly, through that bias lens. And not saying that the bias has to be negative. It could be a pro-bias as well. But you have to peel back those layers of the onion, because is that going to inform your ability to pick this individual? If this individual was the best one that interviewed, but yet you're looking for somebody that can operate in a high stress environment, but they never deployed to a war zone, do you give them as much credit as you give to the next person that maybe served in a war zone? So even within the veteran community, there's that stigmatization of, are you a peacetime veteran or are you a wartime veteran, right? So yeah. I don't want to say that stigmas are only between civilians and military members, because they exist within the military members, when judging each other. I'm guilty as charged. So So it's one of those things that, and I think that, staying away from the hot button topics as well. Not every soldier gets out of the military, whether, 4 years, 10 years, 20 years with PTSD or disability rating or all of these different things that we automatically term to veterans, right? So just knowing that, a veteran that served honorably in the military could have a bunch of things that they're dealing with outside of the interview process. But when they're in front of you in the interview process, that's their ability to show their knowledge, skills, and experience, not all of their, invisible or visible scars that they've experienced from their military service.
And that's really helpful. So I've done my homework. I've done my proper screening. I've hired my first veteran. I'm really excited. They just transitioned out, and I want to do the best job I can to support them, knowing that no one person's the same as the other. From your experience and what you've heard from others, any tips, tricks for how not a hiring manager, but now a supervisor can best support someone who just transitioned out of the military into local government?
Sit down with them and have an expectations conversation right off the bat. Because a soldier, no matter soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, they operate best with structure. So I can tell you that. So if you just give them a stack of papers and say, go read this, they'll do that, but they're going to be bored out of their gourd, right? You need to set an expectation level with them up front. And really it helps to have a well-defined work plan for what that person's going to be engaged in, because then they know off the jump what they're going to be exposed to. Building in a multifaceted work plan as well is key. Not only are they going to be doing maybe office type work, but get them engaged in field work, get them engaged in council meetings, right? Let them see all of the different nooks and crannies of your agency, because you may have somebody like me, for example. I served as 8 years as a military police officer. Never thought that my skill set would translate to customer experience and tax collection, two completely separate worlds. But all of my police skills, de-escalation, verbal judo, things that I learned in dealing in policing situations translated directly to customer service and de-escalating situations when you're talking about people's money and property taxes, because it's a very sensitive topic, right? People don't want the government to come and snatch their house up because they didn't pay their property taxes. So really, I had to learn how my skills in my cop toolbox translated to a customer service role. So you may have somebody that gets out of the military and maybe they did public affairs, or maybe they were attached to a special operations team that, was deployed in various parts of the world, and they know all about governance structure and helping war-torn countries and doing all these things, but you have no idea how you're going to bring that in. But you bring it in and you find out, okay, well, they're great at emergency messaging, and we attach them to the public works department, and, they're able to craft messaging and act as a PIO and do all these different things, right? Because you're finding where that box of skills that they have fits within your agency. And the only way that you can unlock those types of connections are by exposing people to various aspects of your agency, because you don't want to just say, okay, well, you were in the military and you did X, so we're going to find the most comparable thing and we're going to just stick you there for 6 months, right? That's your opportunity to test drive and shape and allow them to work on policy over here or operations over here to see where their passion is as well, because they may have a desire to, do policy work, but their background in the military was kicking indoors. I mean, maybe it doesn't sound like a direct translation, but if they're able to connect those dots, give them the opportunity.
All right. Sounds good. Well, I know I have a list of things I'm writing down that I want to do. I'm sure my HR department's going to be very frustrated with me, but I'm used to it, right?
Happy to help.
Yeah. So I wanted to transition a little bit from the military conversation to, I think, another conversation that's really important, which is men's mental health, right? I know you're someone who's really involved in advocating for and supporting men's mental health. So first, love to hear from you a little bit about the Here Brotherhood. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes, here. We're here to hear. Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about kind of what that group does and its mission and why and how it spoke to you and just start with that, I guess.
Absolutely. So a little bit of background, when I got out of the military, right, like I deployed to Iraq in 2005. I had some issues with substance abuse because I was numbing, from some of the experiences that I had while in the military, right? So recovery and PTSD awareness, those are big things for me, right? That they're omnipresent in my day-to-day activities. So when I started to separate more from my military identity and look at more of just the general population of men's health identity, there's really this stigma that, men carry around that we're just supposed to suck it up and deal, right? It doesn't matter if the situation's crappy. We're just supposed to muddle through it anyway. And we don't cry. We don't we don't have emotional breakdowns and all these kind of things. And there was just this huge societal label that, I was really interested in figuring out how I can affect change in that realm, because I know in processing the things that I process with my PTSD and my alcohol recovery, right? Those were transformational points in my life. And I know I'm not unique, right? I'm garden variety. There's more of me than I'm willing to acknowledge. And the only way that we can reach others is by being vulnerable and willing to tell our own story. So that way other people can identify with it. So how I got connected with here, was probably May or June of this year. I just started seeing organically things pop up in my LinkedIn feed. And I was like, well, I don't really know what this is, but I'm interested. So I just kind of followed along. And the Here Brotherhood, its mission statement is to forge a global brotherhood of growth and support. And I was like, wow, that sounds, really just kind of open and ambiguous. I'm not quite sure, what this is, but when I peeled back the layers of the onion more, I realized that they were embarking upon something completely different from social media. They were embarking upon a social support app. And it's really a community of like-minded men that want to be okay not being okay and share the struggles of life and not have to put on that mask and that face constantly. And to date, I'm happy to share that we've had over 10,000 men sign up on our website to sign the oath to be our brother's keeper and to vow to be a listener and an ear and be there whenever, another man reaches out for help or support. We've got 1,500 people that have joined our app. Our app is available in both Android and the Apple Store, the Here Brotherhood app. But it's really just, a social space for men to connect with each other on a very organic level, open-minded, willing, honest communication about anything under the sun, whether you're a father, a husband, a single dude. Our demographic that we're seeing kind of that's, working through our app is about 25 to 50 age range. Just experiencing all the different aspects of life, laid off from a job, struggling to try to figure out how to be a better father or deal with, some social emotional things with their family dynamic, but really just being there and being supportive for other men and being willing to tell the story that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful and something that in society we're frankly pretty bad at.
No, absolutely. And, the more that I lean into that, I do have a background in finance working for my agency. So I was approached and been afforded the opportunity to join the leadership team with Here to be their interim CFO. So that way we can get the financial structures in place, because we want to make sure that this thing continues to grow and support as many men as we can, not only in the United States, but globally. So as this thing catches fire and, we've got venture capitalists that are interested in putting forth seed money and all the things that we're doing to grow this out, we want to make sure that it's still accessible to the masses, right? So we're trying to figure out that balance between, okay, well, if we're a corporation, we have to monetize, but if we monetize, then we become exclusive. And how do we create a nonprofit side so that way if folks need the support, that we can still fund the support through the nonprofit aspect, but then still be revenue generating through a for-profit model. So there's a lot of things that we're growing through in the infancy of the organization, but I think the the proof is in the pudding, right? Like, we are there to listen to each other and to be supports for each other. And I just got back from an amazing retreat. We went to Zion. 33 guys from all over the United States flew in, and we just had a mental health wellness retreat where we did Tai Chi, breath work. We hiked in Zion. It was just absolutely amazing to just experience the presence and be grounded in such a beautiful place with 33 dudes that are just doing life the same way you are.
All right. Well, it sounds like people should check out the Here Brotherhood, but, regardless of if that's for them or not, just from what you're learning from that engagement, for the folks who are listening who maybe they're struggling a little bit with something going on in life, 1 or 2 tips or tricks that you've learned from the Here Brotherhood that might be really helpful to our listeners.
Absolutely. Find yourself an accountability circle, right? It doesn't have to be colleagues. It doesn't have to be family. It can be friends. It can be, folks in your church community, but get yourself an accountability group. Just the power of having just like a group text message on your phone. And when you're feeling just bottomed out, just sending that SOS message to a couple of people and then just letting them love on you. It has a profound impact on your state of mind. I think the other thing that's hard as human beings to resist is, developing a resentment and just wanting to wall yourself off, right? I call it taking hostages, right? And the reason I call it taking hostages is because you're taking yourself hostage and you're just withdrawing from life, right? And we all have those experiences that absolutely suck. And we're like, I just don't want to get out of bed today. And I just want to be. And so for some of us, it could be a day. For some of us, it could be a weekend. Some of us, we feel like we're in that constant rut and we just can't break out of it. And the thing that resonates with me the most is, that telephone weighs 1,000 pounds when you're in that rut and you're in that hole and you don't want to pick it up. You don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want anybody to try to talk you out of how you've justified where you are. But like I said, the biggest thing you can do is just reach out. And it doesn't have to be detailed, right? It just has to be, it could be as simple as texting somebody, I'm not okay. And if the answer is, okay, I'm going to go pick up coffee and meet you at your house, then somebody comes over and you just talk. You have a human connection, right? Like, cause so often we feel like we're burdening other people when we want to talk about our issues. And the only way we can really get through them is if we process them.
There's funny enough, you bring that up. There's a Happiness Lab podcast that talks about reacher that shows that when you reach out, the person who brings you the coffee, you reaching out does more for their mental health than it does for yours. It's fascinating stuff.
Absolutely.
Well, Ben, I just thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really enlightening. I have a long list of things to think about. Before we start wrapping up, though, anything that you really want our listeners to hear that we haven't had a chance to talk about today?
I think giving yourself permission to explore non-traditional hiring paths, and I'm speaking to every local government administrator across the United States and abroad, allow yourself to be creative. Find ways to bring non-traditional talent streams into your recruiting pool, and you will just sit back and be amazed with the results. A little plug for myself, and I can shoot it over to Rafael and he can share it with the readership, but I did an article in PM Magazine in January 22, I think it was, about non-traditional hiring paths into local government. And you don't have to be a large agency to be able to do this. Some of the most creative hiring I've seen is in very small agencies, just finding a way to meet that need. So if you're not satisfied with the current structure that you have, challenge status quo, because there are ways to do it still within the civil service rules that open up, just awesome talent pools to you that you never knew existed.
Great stuff. Well, I got to ask the most important question of the day. This is the question our listeners care most about. If you could pick, if you were the DJ for Gov Love, what would be your walkout song?
It's the DJ for Gov Love. I'm really in kind of a throwback 90s workout music thing right now. So I think it would probably be Come Down by Bush. That would
All
probably be my walkout song.
All right. Sounds like a good choice. Well, that's our episode for today. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining me. GovLove, brought to you by ELGL. Best way to support GovLove is to join ELGL. Follow us at elgl.org or on Twitter, or X, I guess is what we call it now, at GovLove Podcast. Subscribe to us on any app and tell your friends and colleagues about us. Thank you so much for joining GovLove today.